Hi, I'm Alfie Terry, and today I'm going to be interviewing my father, Francis Terry, about the question of what's more important. Is it the materials that the building's made out of and the processes involved, or is it the form, the sort of ultimate vision for the house? And Dad, you mentioned here that you use the example of the Villa Rotonda, and you say, would it be any less beautiful if it was made out of cheese? Which is
Yeah.
quite an interesting image.
Well, it's a
Yeah.
sort of provocative point.
Provocative, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a sort of dilemma you have as an architect regularly, that because obviously the best thing is to make things out of the best materials. That's
Yeah.
obviously everyone's preference. But because you live in the real world, people have budgets, they have time constraints,
Yeah.
and you have to make compromises. So, for example, sometimes the ornament on a building has to be made in reconstructed stone,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
effectively concrete, good quality concrete, but concrete nonetheless. And um, you know that these are compromises that has to be done. But and I think that there has been, quite often people say about classical architecture, well, if you're not going to do it with proper materials, it isn't worth doing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I disagree. I think in a way there is a level to in which a building is a stage set, and it needs to look right. And if it's not made out of the best materials, that's better than having an ugly building, is my view.
Yes. Well, would you say it's better than having an ugly building that is made out of really good materials?
That's an interesting one. I mean, I think another way of looking at that is a badly proportioned building, whatever materials you make it from, is still going to be ugly. You can use
Yeah.
the most
Yeah.
beautiful stone,
Yeah, yeah.
the most expensive window system,
mm.
but if it's a bad design, it's a bad design,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah,
will be
yeah.
ugly, whatever. I mean, I think it's amazing actually that quite a lot of things you just walk past daily are made of quite substandard things.
Yeah.
I remember someone pointing out to me I think it was an urn on some historic property, and he pointed and said that's made of fiberglass. And no one ever knew.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of moss on it, and
It
in a few
looks
years'
real,
time,
doesn't
and it looks
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And it was always that way. That I mean, you think about I suppose architecture as stage sets. When a king would come to a city, they would, during the Baroque period, they would build these huge, great arches
Yeah. Yeah.
out of timber and papier-mâché and paint them up, and they'd have trompe-l'oeil on them. Complete fakes, but certainly things of beauty. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
they wouldn't survive the test of time, but it doesn't stop them having a beauty to them.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, yeah. But the sort of underlying language that it was built out of was good enough to make it
Yes,
make it
yes.
exciting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess what a sort of question I'd ask about that is, obviously you have the raw materials that you make buildings out of. I think particularly nowadays, people are very concerned about just being quite purist
Yes.
about the materials they make stuff out of, and kind of wanting to build things in a way that sort of brings out keeping it its natural state. But my question is, like, can you do that? Can a
Yeah.
building ever can the materials of the building ever be in its natural state, or does it need to be sculpted by human hands in order to bring it
Yeah,
out?
I mean, I think this is an argument that rather obsessed the Victorians, particularly Ruskin, and there is this idea called truth to materials, and that you should allow the materials to be the material that it is and
Yeah.
behave in a way that is natural to that materials. You know, stone will behave one way, wood would behave another way.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is very much part of the modernist dogma. And I think and this might be Fountainhead, but it might also be Louis Kahn, I can't remember. But there is a modernist idea, allow a brick to be a brick. I mean, it's quite a persuasive idea, and I think ideally, yes, it would be nice to allow all materials to build from the best materials, of course. Why wouldn't you? But I think the concept of truth to materials, like how does it? I mean, you know, I think that a material reveals itself if you don't think about truth. You know, you put it under stress. You know, like the Gothic cathedrals. That's not a natural way for stone to be. It would rather not be that. You know, like the Hindu thing, the arch never sleeps. You know, poor arch. It's not. It would much rather just be lying in the ground. Frankly.
Well, we assume maybe it thinks it's rather important.
Making big assumptions here.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose just to apply that analogy to foods, maybe. I would say that you know, processing an aubergine, for example, you know, eating a raw aubergine isn't that exciting, but it's when you drizzle a bit of olive oil on and chuck it in the oven a bit. That really brings it out, its flavour. And I wonder if, you know, seeing a block of marble, you don't really see very much, but when you have someone chipping away at it and making a beautiful sculpture, it almost reveals its truer essence.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think that an aubergine actually is a good analogy because they are, if you've ever tried a raw aubergine with no salt, it tastes of nothing. It just tastes of fluff. You need the olive oil, you need the salt, you need the seasoning. And so, the truth to the aubergine would be to have it raw, tasting of nothing. But I think, and that's a very good analogy there, that you need human will to make it into something specific that brings out the most in it. And as you say, that would be the same with carving stone, is that and actually Michelangelo did talk about he saw his sculptures as freeing the figures that are already there, which they are in some weird way. And it always reminds me of that funny thing he said, is like, you know, sculpture isn't very difficult. You just carve until you get to the skin and then stop.
Which is one interesting way of looking at it.
And
I suppose you could maybe apply a similar analogy to musical instruments, you know, like in a sense, if you just pluck the string of a violin, that's the true sounds. But you need, you know, if you have some expert of the violin who plays it really beautifully, is it kind of less true? You know, what's the true sound of a violin?
No, absolutely. I mean, by that rationale, an out of tune violin is more true because they do go out of tune. So no, I think you have to be very specific, and it has to. There is the human will, creativity, put on top of these things to bring out the violinness of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned the Victorians, you know, and obviously the whole Gothic movement. What did they have to say about kind of truth to materials?
Well, they were the ones who really invented it. And I think, like all these things, there is a bit of... You can understand where they were coming from. I think Ruskin was in Venice at a time when they were knocking down quite a lot of historic bits of Venice. Well, they're probably just restoring. I mean, buildings need restoring anyway, and they restored them very well. And he is, you know, his book, The Stones of Venice, is about how those stones were hewn by medieval people, and you know, they mustn't be touched, rather than saying the effect of those stones. And you know, if you've got another stone that is pretty much the same and replaced it, that would be just as good. And for him, and this unfortunately has come through to the Society of Protection of Ancient Buildings, SPAB, where they are just like that. It's like Clarendon Park, which has burnt down recently. Their argument is it shouldn't be restored because those very stones have gone, it's actually the plasterwork rather has gone, and even if you could make it identical to what was there, it's a fake because it isn't actually those bits of plasterwork modelled by that Italian in the 18th century. But, very few people think that the restoration of Notre Dame was a mistake. And you could argue, those aren't the same things. Anyway, I digress. But it effectively is the argument that there is, I suppose, it's sort of slightly off topic, but effectively the materials themselves are important. And I think that Ruskin was also frustrated by a lot of London at the time was being built in what I think is very good classical style. So this would be areas like Sussex Gardens, Paddington, Bayswater, and then Pimlico. Basically the whole of London was being built in classical form very nicely. And they just painted it all off-white or white, and it was white stucco, and the materials had no bearing on the artistic vision. They and they were also putting it up at an alarming rate, which must have sort of scared him. And I think what he felt is that the medieval cathedral, and this is a completely vacuous way of looking at things, but the medieval cathedral was built by sort of love, effectively. Like all these masons were happily singing psalms together as they built. And it was this wonderful collaboration. And it was a sort of a joyful thing. So in a way, what he was saying is the modern way of doing things, which is highly mechanistic and ignores materials effectively. They don't care what these Bayswater's made of. They'll just build it in this white stucco, up it goes. Whilst traditionally buildings were built with great love, people enjoyed building them. And that is actually another point. This is completely off topic, but I think it's a really important thing, and I would agree with Ruskin on this, is that some consideration for the person building the building is important. And I think that modern buildings are horrible to build. You're cutting up insulation, which is often carcinogenic, breathing it in as you're doing it. Or it might not be carcinogenic now, but they might well prove it is later on. And then you're dealing with horrible materials, which concrete. If you touch concrete, it burns you. And then there's reinforcing bars, which are kind of metal, and then you have to kind of wrap little wires around them. And also the whole mechanistic nature of building with big machines. A building site is a really unpleasant place. And so I am quite sympathetic to Ruskin on, I think a classical building is a nice building to build. Stone is a lovely form of construction. I see stonemasons on my jobs, and they seem to, it's a wonderfully kind of accurate, and it's a wonderful endeavour. Very perfectionist. And very permanent. And I think timber is a lovely thing to work with, the smells, the cutting of it, and so on. And I certainly think that is a consideration. And I suppose that aspect of truth to materials, I'm pretty sympathetic to. But I think, just to keep it simple for this discussion, should a building be determined by some artistic person who says, I think it should look like this.
Yeah.
I don't care what materials you use to build it.
Yeah.
Or should you just say, let's just think of the brief and how do the materials want to work, and we'll just do that. I mean, for example, if you really took that seriously, you would never cut a brick.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's where do you stop?
Yeah, and we cut bricks the whole time.
Yeah.
Because they need to go around window openings in a very particular way with closers and so on. And but there are modernist buildings where that was the brief.
Yeah.
They just never cut a brick, and
Right.
they just look lazy. Basically.
Okay, so how do you
Yeah,
do that?
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
then you have to kind of make the building
Just have
slightly
one
bigger
massive
or smaller.
brick, yeah.
No, I mean they just lay them, but yeah, they're never cut.
Right.
So no, I mean they are actual brick size.
Yeah.
But we always cut bricks so that we get the openings where we want them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And their view, there is a building which just doesn't cut any bricks.
Yeah.
So then the opening positions are determined by the not cutting of bricks, which seems stupid.
Yeah, especially because it's not like the bricks are just coming out of the ground. You know, they're still, they're still an artificial thing anyway. So, might as well just finish the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you don't think people were kind of singing psalms as they designed cathedrals in medieval times?
No, I don't. I think to do those things, the scale they did.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't cutting up insulation, so they were lucky, and they weren't pouring concrete and getting burnt from it.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think they were singing psalms. I think unfortunately, wonderful as those cathedrals are, you wouldn't turn up every day and lay stone for your whole life unless you were paid, or
you were forced to.
You're forced to, sadly.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah. And were they quite interested in the triglyph?
Yeah,
as well?
the triglyph is a good point, and I think that this is what I think someone like I think Ruskin thought the triglyph was a very ugly thing.
Yeah.
The triglyph, as you no doubt know, is the piece of ornament that you get in a frieze of a Doric order, and it looks a bit like cricket stumps.
Yeah.
And it's a very distinctive classical feature. And Ruskin didn't like them. And what's interesting for this discussion is that the triglyph is a piece of ornament that comes out of timber construction.
Yeah.
What it is, it's the end of a beam, and then there are little ornaments called gutti, which are little blocks or little pegs that would be nailed into the triglyph, nailed into the beam to keep it into place. So what you've got is timber construction, which has been copied for stone construction. And there are triglyphs on the Parthenon. So this has been going on at least since the ancient Greeks, maybe before. So, the classical temple has triglyphs, which refers to wooden construction. So that isn't true to materials, because they're not made of wood. But the triglyph with the little grooves in it and the gutti and the whole setup is a rather wonderful geometric design, which looks very nice in stone. But it has no structural performance. I think Ruskin and the later modernists, they like to fetishize construction, and there are some architects who really enjoy having things like wires on buildings that are like tensile wires, like turning building floors into effectively like bridges, effectively. So you can see how it was constructed and how that is a nice thing to see. And I think certainly classicism, you don't want to see how it's constructed. And that there was this movement in the 80s called the high-tech movement that's still with us actually, where they would show off construction in this way, and I think it's not great. I think that I remember there was an interview with the pianist Glenn Gould, who said what he likes about Bach is that he's kind of not trying to be clever, and he's just doing his thing. And he bears his sorrows with a kind of dignity. And I think that there is a kind of, the floor's being held up. We're fine. I'm not going to song and dance about it. You don't have to know how I do it. The floor is just being held up. And I think that's certainly true. And I think that a classical facade, don't worry about what I'm made of. I'm well proportioned, and that's the end of the discussion. And my historical precedents are correct. And I think that Gothic architecture does show. Well, I suppose the analogy is that the Gothic cathedrals, you can see the structural forces coming down the ceiling all the way down to the floor. But that's not particularly true, because a fan vault like at King's in Cambridge is that you don't need that. You can just have a flat vault and it would do the same function. It's a kind of representation of function.
Well, I guess maybe this is a bit off topic, but you do get these. That did make me think of, if you go to like a really expensive burger restaurant, they'll often have the ventilation shaft to kind of they won't cover up the ventilation shaft.
I know. That's the same thing. That's the same exactly. And I dare say that, I mean, funnily enough, there is this thing called, with the high-tech movement, there's a building by Richard Rogers called Lloyd's. There's one in Pompidou in Paris, where these buildings are pretty old now. So the technology that did all those it's buildings that basically made out of ventilation pipes. It's that Burger King, whatever it is, the expensive burger.
It's not even Burger King, it's kind of more expensive places.
Exclusive burgers.
Very exclusive.
That, the technology's changed. So those pipes could be tiny now. So what do you do? Do you completely change the architecture? But now those pipes are listed. So, so that's a complete facade, because probably inside there's a teeny little pipe that's doing all the work. And that's just kind of a memory of what was built previously. So, it's a kind of, it's just a facade like a classical building. I mean, it's funny how these things happen over time, that a lot of modernist buildings are very old now. I mean, the modern movement is 100 years old.
That's a weird thought. I don't want to make too much of an analogy, but I think an interesting thing to do maybe is to compare different cuisine styles to, this thing. Like I know some cuisines focus more on kind of bringing out the flavours of the foods, the raw ingredients. Meanwhile, some they kind of have an image in mind of what they want, and the food is a means to get there. Which I think is quite an interesting idea. I mean, do you think that's an oversimplification of what you're trying to do with your
I think going back to your original thing about the aubergine, I think that's very true. I think you need some level of human craftsmanship to make the most of that flavour. You can't just, even an avocado, you can't just pick that from a tree and eat it. It needs some salt and needs some olive oil. And I think you can go too far as well. I think, I mean, strangely enough, actually, another prong to the modernist movement is to completely hide everything. There, like there are these white render buildings like the Villa Savoie, where you have no idea how anything was built. And that is another prong to it. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a sense of balance. I mean, I was thinking about these. I mean, I struggle with these kind of Michelin star restaurants where someone takes an aubergine and kind of deconstructs it so that, you know, you have a new interpretation of what an aubergine should taste like. And I think that you need a sense of balance.
Yeah.
I think in a way things should be themselves, but not too much.
Not too much, yeah.
Well, that's humans, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think, I guess, if you had like because I think British cuisine is often criticised, but one thing I think is very good about British cuisine is it is, you know, it's very much about bringing the flavour out of things. And you think of kind of like a nice, I don't know, a ham sandwich or something, and, you know, like you say, it'd be no good just eating the ham out of the packet. You need to kind of wrap it up in.
Yeah, but there's quite a lot of processing before you've got a piece of ham. You've got to kill a pig. And
I get where do you stop? You know, that's the trouble.
Exactly. I mean, in a way, the ham sandwich for me would make me argue the other way. I would argue truth to materials on the ham sandwich, because a ham sandwich can be the most beautiful thing if you've got the best bread that's come freshly out of an oven, wonderful butter, freshly churned, and then, you know, some ham that was from a pig who had a lovely life and beautifully cured, and then that is a lovely thing. You know, you compare that to a sandwich which is from one of those triangular containers from a garage, and that really is
doesn't do it for you, does it?
Oh, and the bread sticks to your teeth.
It's awful.
So I think I would on that analogy that I'd argue the other way on that one.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I guess what you're saying is like the Villa Rotonda could be made out of not cheese, but, you know, cement, and it would still look beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I think on that sort of conclusion, that's everything. And if you've enjoyed this, thanks very much for watching, and you can check out the full blog on our website. And thanks very much.